Part 3 From Self to Cosmic Consciousness. I apologize about that boring stuff from before, but it is necessary to teach you a little bit about that. That way, you'll have a good idea of what to expect next when we get to the good stuff, which is this stuff right here. From self consciousness to cosmic consciousness. Okay. As the faculties referred to in the last division of this volume, and many more, came into existence in the race, each in its own time, when the race was ready for it, let us assume, as we must, that growth, evolution, development, or whatever we choose to call it, has, as thus exemplified, always gone on, and is going on now, and as far as we can tell, will always go on. If we are right in such an assumption, new faculties will from time to time arise in the mind as in the past new faculties have arisen. This being granted, let us assume that what in this book is called cosmic consciousness is such a nascent, such a wordende faculty. And now let us see what we know about this new sense, state, faculty, or whatever it may be called. And first, it may be noted that the new sense does not appear by chance in this man or that. It is necessary for its appearance that an exalted human personality should exist and supply the preconditions for its birth. In the great cases especially is there an exceptional development of some or all of the ordinary human faculties. Note particularly that, since that case is unmistakably known to us, the singular perfection of the intellectual and moral faculties and of the species senses in Walt Whitman. Great Walt Whitman. It is probable that an approximation to this evolutionary excellence is necessary in all cases. Then certainly in some, probably in all cases, the person has an exceptional physique, exceptional beauty of build and carriage, exceptionally handsome features, exceptional health, exceptional sweetness of temper, exceptional magnetism. Part 2. The faculty itself has many names, but they have not been understood or recognized. It will be well to give some of them here. They will be better understood as we advance. Either Gautama himself or someone of his early disciples called it nirvana because of the extinction of certain lower mental faculties such as the sense of sin, fear of death, desire of wealth, etc., which is directly incident upon its birth. This subjugation of the old personality along with the birth of the new is, in fact, almost equivalent to the annihilation of the old and the creation of a new self. The word nirvana, is defined as the state to which the Buddhist saint is to aspire, as the highest aim and highest good. Jesus called the new condition the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of heaven, because of the peace and happiness which belong to it and which are perhaps its most characteristic features. Paul called it Christ. He speaks of himself as a man in Christ, of them that are in Christ. He also calls it the Spirit and the Spirit of God. After Paul had entered cosmic consciousness, he knew that Jesus had possessed the cosmic sense and that he was living, as it were, the life of Jesus, that another individuality, another self, lived in him. This second self he called Christ, the divinely sent deliverer, identifying it not so much with the man Jesus, as with the deliverer which was to be sent and which had been sent to this person, who was both Jesus, the ordinary self-conscious man, and Messiah, the herald exemplar of the new higher race. The duplex personality of men having cosmic consciousness will appear many times as we proceed and will be seen to be a constant and prominent phenomenon. Mohammed called the cosmic sense Gabriel, and seems to have looked upon it as a distinctly separate person who lived in him and spoke to him. Dante called it Beatrice, making happy, which means making happy, a name almost or quite equivalent to kingdom of heaven. Balzac called the new man a specialist and the new condition of specialism. Whitman called cosmic consciousness my soul, but spoke of it as if it were another person. For instance, O soul repressless, I with thee and thou with me. We two take ship, O soul, with laugh and many a kiss. O soul, thou pleasest me, I thee. I myself, huh? Bacon in the sonnets has treated the cosmic sense so emphatically as a distinct person that the world for 300 years has taken him at his word and has agreed that the person in question, whatever his name may have been, was a young friend of the poets. To illustrate the objectifications of this purely subjective phenomena, though it must be remembered that To the person with cosmic consciousness, the terms objective and subjective lose their old meaning, and object grows, and the unseen soul become one. It will not be amiss to quote a passage from a poet who, though he is a case of cosmic consciousness, is not included in the present volume for the reason that the present writer has not been able to obtain the details necessary for that purpose. Here we go. So mused the traveler on the earthly plane, being in himself a type of all mankind. For aspirations dim at first possessed him only, rising vaguely in his dreams, till in ripe years his early musings changed to inspiration and the light of soul. Then vision came, and in the light he saw what he had hoped now openly revealed, and much besides the inmost soul of things, and beauty as the crown of life itself, ineffable, transcending mortal form. For robed in light, no longer fantasy, before his gaze the true ideal stood, sublimely fair beyond conception, clothed in beauty and divinest symmetry. Yet pined he not like him of Latmos when, in dreaming ecstasy, upon the hills, beneath the moon, he saw his love unveiled. For well he knew the crowning of his life was in that vision and would be fulfilled. Nay, was fulfilled, for henceforth by his side a radiant being stood, his guiding light and polar star, that as a magnet held him in the hold of ever-during love. But how describe this being henceforth his? What words can tell you what words transcend, but say that she was fair beyond all human thought? For who could paint those features in that form, so exquisitely molded that no art could reach them or convey in any mode the smile upon those rosy lips or catch, and give the full expression of those eyes, so wonderful, half veiled beneath the sweep of soft and curving lashes that enhanced, beyond describing the effect that flowed. From out of the liquid depths of those full orbs, the founts of love, so full of smoldering fire and passion, yet so tender and so chaste. Her every movement too, so perfect seemed, like nature heightened by unconscious art, and all her bearing gentleness itself, for not that majesty that overawes, that high imperious consciousness of worth that makes the lowly shrink abashed, was here, but in its stead was all the winning grace and sweetness that immortal love could add, to beautify its shrine and make thereof a fitting habitation for itself. For bending forward with that wondrous look, so inexpressible, she seemed to say, "Thou art my own, mine equal and my spouse, my complement without whom I were not. So in mine eyes thou art more fair than I, for in thee only is my life fulfilled." Then added, in harmonious voice aloud, "Thou long hast thought upon life's mystery, its vast, eternally recurring rounds of rest and rebirth and activity, and sought therein in the passage of the soul from light to dark, from dark to light again. Come then with me, and we will see in part the latter and its human phase unveiled." So saying, with her presence she endowed him the new senses, brand new senses, faculties and powers that far surpass the limits of the old. Concluding. Okay, part 3. It has already been incidentally mentioned, that a race entering upon the possession of a new faculty, especially if this be in the line of direct ascent of the race, as is certainly the case with cosmic consciousness, the new faculty will necessarily be acquired at first not only by the best specimens of the race, but also when these are at their best, that is, at full maturity and before the decline incident to age has set in. What now are the facts in this regard as to the coming of the cosmic sense? They may be summarized in a few words as follows. Of 34 cases in which illumination was instantaneous and the period at which it occurred was with some degree of certainty known, the age at which the person passed into cosmic consciousness was in one instant 24 years, in 3, 30 years, in 2, 31 years, in 2, 31 and a half years, in 3, 32 years, in 1, 33 years, in 2, 34 years, in 8, 35 years, in 2, 36 years, in 2, 37 years, in 2, 38 years, in 3, 39 years, in 1, 40 years, and in 1, 49 years, and then last but not least, 1 in 54 years. Evidence will be given as the cases are treated individually, and the age of each person at illumination will be given below in a tabular statement along with other facts. Part 4. Cosmic consciousness then appears in individuals mostly of the male sex, who are otherwise highly developed, men of good intellect, of high moral qualities, of superior physique. It appears at about that time of life when the organism is at its high watermark of efficiency at the age of 30 to 40 years. It must have been that the immediate precursor of cosmic consciousness, self-consciousness, also appeared at first in midlife, here and there in isolated cases, in the most advanced specimens of the race, becoming more and more nearly universal as the race grew up to it, manifesting itself at an earlier and earlier age until, as we see, it declares itself now in every fairly constituted individual at about the age of 3 years. Self-consciousness. Analogy, then, would lead us to believe that the step in promotion which is the subject of this volume also awaits the whole race, that a time will come when to be without the faculty in question will be a mark of inferiority parallel to the absence at present of the moral nature. The presumption seems to be that the new sense will become more and more common and show itself earlier in life, until after many generations it will appear in each normal individual at the age of puberty or even earlier, then go on becoming still more universal and appearing at a still earlier age until after many thousands of generations it shows itself immediately after infancy in nearly every member of the race. Part 5. It must be clearly understood that all cases of cosmic consciousness are not on the same plane. Or if we speak of simple consciousness, self-consciousness, and cosmic consciousness as each occupying a plane, then as the range of self-consciousness on its plane, where one man may be an Aristotle, a Caesar, a Newton, or a Comte, while his neighbor on the next street may be intellectually and morally, to all appearance, little, if at all, above the animal in his stable, is far greater than the range of simple consciousness in any given species on its plane. So we must suppose that the range of cosmic consciousness, given millions of cases as on the other planes, is greater than that of self-consciousness, and it is probably, in fact, very much greater both in kind and degree. That is to say, given a world peopled with men having cosmic consciousness, they would vary both in the way of greater and less intellectual ability, and greater and less moral and spiritual elevation, and also in the way of variety of character, more than would the inhabitants of a planet on the plane of self-consciousness. Within the plane of cosmic consciousness, one man shall be a god, while another shall not be. To casual observation, lifted so very much above ordinary humanity, however much his inward life may be exalted, strengthened, and purified by the new sense. But as the self-conscious man, however degraded, is in fact almost infinitely above the animal with merely simple consciousness, so any man permanently endowed with cosmic sense would be almost infinitely higher and nobler than any man who is self-conscious merely. And not only so, but the man who has had the cosmic sense for even a few moments will only probably never again descend to the spiritual level of the merely self-conscious man. But 20, 30, or 40 years afterwards, he will still feel within him the purifying, strengthening, and exalting effect of that divine illumination, and many of those about him will recognize that his spiritual stature is above that of the average man. Part 6. The hypothesis adopted by the present writer requires that the cases of cosmic consciousness should become more numerous from age to age, and not only so, but they should become more perfect, more pronounced. What are the facts? Putting aside minor cases, such as must have appeared and been forgotten by hundreds in the last few millenniums, of those given above, at least 13 are so great that they could never fade from human memory, namely Gautama, the Buddha, Jesus, Paul, his disciple, Plotinus, Mohammed, Dante, Las Casas, John Yeats, Francis Bacon, Jacob Behmen, William Blake, Balzac, and our great Walt Whitman. From Gautama to Dante, we count 1,800 years, within which period we have 5 cases. Again, from Dante to the present day, we count 600 years, in which we have 8 cases. That is to say, while in the earlier period there was 1 case to every 360 years, in the later there was a case to each 75 years. In other words, cosmic consciousness has been 4.8 times more frequent during the latter period than it was in the former. And before the time of Gautama, there were probably no or few and imperfectly developed cases. We know that at present there are many of what may be called lesser cases, but number of these cannot be compared with the number of similar cases in the past for the reason that the latter are lost. It must also be remembered that the 13 great cases given above are only perhaps a small fraction of cases just as great which have occurred since the time of Gautama for Probably, I don't know why I ended the sentence there. For probably only a small proportion of the great cases undertake and carry through work which ensures them remembrance. How easily might the memory even of Jesus have been obliterated from the minds of his contemporaries and followers almost before it was born? Many today think that, all else granted, if he had not been immediately followed by Paul, his work and name would have expired together almost with the generation that heard him speak. So true is this that so able a man as Auguste Comte considers Saint Paul le vrai fondateur du Catholicisme, in which is in this connection is synonymous with Christianism, gives him the 8th month in the calendar positivity, and does not even award a day to Jesus. So little part did this latter seem to him to have played in the evolution of religion and of the race. And even of those who write, the work and memory must have often died and been lost. Of one of the greatest of these, there may be said that the Great Fire occurred only a few years earlier and might possibly have destroyed every copy of the 1623 folio and deprived the world forever of the Shakespeare drama. Either the spoken or written work of these men can only, in the nature of things, be appreciated by a select few of their contemporaries, and is in almost every case exceedingly liable to be forgotten. That this is as true today as in the day of Gautama, no one can doubt who has closely followed the career of Walt Whitman. Even in his case, the written word would almost certainly have been lost if he had died, as he easily might, from accident or disease during the war, even although at that time 3 editions of the Leaves had been printed. He himself did not consider the message secure from extinction even almost down to the time of his death, although he had labored unremittingly for 35 years at the planting of it. Then, as to the relative greatness of ancient and modern cases, the judgment of the world at large must necessarily be against the latter, because the time required to arrive at an appreciation of them has not elapsed. And what is reason and so-called common sense worth in such a question as this, anyway? As Victor Hugo says of les genies, "Poisir entre ces hommes préfère l'une et l'autre indiquer du doigt les premiers parmi ces premiers cela ne se peut." What living man indeed is able to say, time enough having surely gone, who was the greater, Gautama or Jesus? And if we cannot decide between these two, still less can we between either of them and, for instance, Whitman. Many believe today that the last named was the greatest spiritual force yet produced by the race, which would mean that he is the greatest case of cosmic consciousness to date. But the balance of opinion would be, of course, thousands to one averse to this contention. Part 7. While its true nature has been, and necessarily so, entirely unapprehended, the fact of cosmic consciousness has been long recognized both in the Eastern and Western worlds, and the great majority of civilized men and women in all countries today bow down before teachers who possess the cosmic sense, and not only so, but because they possess the cosmic sense. And not only does the world at large look up with reverence to these men, it says to these men, but perhaps it would be nothing more than the simple truth to say that all uninspired teachers derive the lessons which they transmit directly or indirectly from the few who have been illumined. Part 8. It seems that in every or nearly every man who enters into cosmic consciousness, apprehension is at first more or less excited, the person doubting whether the new sense may not be a symptom or form of insanity. Mohammed was greatly alarmed. I think it is clear that Paul was, and others to be mentioned further on were similarly affected. The first thing each person asks himself upon experiencing the new sense is, does what I see and feel represent reality, or am I suffering from a delusion? The fact that the new experience seems even more real than the old teachings of simple and self-consciousness does not at first fully reassure him, because he probably knows that delusions, when present, possess the mind just as firmly as do actual facts. True or not true, each person who has the experience in question eventually, perforce, believes in its teachings, accepting them as absolutely as any other teachings whatsoever. This, however, would not prove them true, since the same might be said of the delusions of the insane. How then shall we know that this is a new sense revealing fact and not a form of insanity, plunging its subject into delusion? In the first place, the tendencies of the condition in question are entirely unlike, even opposite to, those of mental alienation, these last being distinctly immoral or even immoral, while the former are moral in a very high degree. In the second place, while all forms of insanity, self-restraint, inhibition is greatly reduced, sometimes even abolished, in cosmic consciousness it is enormously increased. The absolute proof of this last statement can be found in the lives of the men here cited as examples. In the third place, whatever the scoffers of a religion may say, it is certain that modern civilization, speaking broadly, rests, as already said, very largely on the teachings of this new sense. The masters are taught by it and the rest of the world by them through their books, followers, and disciples. So that if what is here called cosmic consciousness is a form of insanity, we are confronted by the terrible fact, were it not an absurdity, that our civilization, including all our highest religions, rests on delusion alone. But in the fourth place, far from granting or for a moment entertaining such as an awful alternative, it can be maintained that we have the same evidence of the objective reality which corresponds to this faculty that we have of the reality which tallies any other sense or faculty whatever. Sight, for instance, you know that the tree standing there across the field half a mile away is real, not a hallucination. Because all other persons having the sense of sight to whom you have spoken about it also see it, while if it were an hallucination it would be visible to no one but yourself. By the same method of reasoning do we establish the reality of the objective universe tallying cosmic consciousness. Each person who has the faculty is made aware by it of essentially the same fact or facts. If 3 men looked at the tree and were asked half an hour afterwards to draw or describe it, the 3 drafts or descriptions would not tally in detail, but in general outline would correspond. Just in the same way do the reports of those who have had cosmic consciousness correspond in all essentials, though in detail they doubtless more or less diverge, but these divergences are fully as much in our misunderstanding of the reports as in the reports themselves. So there is no instance of a person who has been illumined denying or disputing the teaching of another who has passed through the same experience. Paul, however little disposed by his prepossessions to accept them, as soon as he attained to the cosmic sense, saw that the teachings of Jesus were true. Mohammed accepted Jesus as not only the greatest of the prophets, but as standing on a plane distinctly above that which upon stood Adam, Noah, Moses, and the rest. He says, "And we sent Noah and Abraham and placed in their seed prophecy and the book, and some of them are guided, though many of them are workers of abomination. Then we followed up in their footsteps with our apostles, and we followed them up with Jesus, the Son of Mary, and we gave him the gospel, and we placed in the hearts of those who followed him kindness and compassion." And Palmer testifies, Mohammed regards our Lord with particular veneration and even goes so far as to call him the Spirit and the Word of God, the Messiah. Walt Whitman accepts the teachings of Buddha, Jesus, Paul, Mohammed, especially of Jesus, of whom he knew the most. As he says, accepting the Gospels, accepting him that was crucified, knowing assuredly that he is right, divine, and if, as Whitman once wished, the great masters might return and study me, nothing is more certain than that they would each and all accept him as a brother of the radiant summit. So all the men known to the present writer who have been, in greater or less degree, illumined, agree in all essentials with one another, and with all past teachers who have been so. Also it seems that all men free from prejudice who know something of more than one religion recognize, as does Sir Edwin Arnold, that the great faiths are sisters, or as Arthur Lilly says, that Buddha and Christ taught much the same doctrine. 9. Part 9. As has been either said or implied already, in order that a man may enter into cosmic consciousness, he must belong, so to speak, to the top layer of the world of self-consciousness. Not that he need have an extraordinary intellect. This faculty is rated usually far above its real value and does not seem nearly so important from this point of view as do some others, though he must not be deficient in this respect either. He must have a good physique, good health, but above all must have an exalted moral nature, strong sympathies, a warm heart, courage, strong and earnest religious feeling. All these being granted, and the man having reached the age necessary to bring him to the top of the self-conscious mental stratum, someday he enters cosmic consciousness What is his experience? Details must be given with diffidence, as they are only known to the writer in a few cases, and doubtless the phenomena are varied and diverse. What is said here, however, may be depended on as far as it goes. It is true of certain cases and certainly touches upon the full truth in certain other cases, so that it may be looked upon as being provisionally correct. A. The person suddenly, without warning, has a sense of being immersed in a flame or rose-colored cloud, or perhaps rather a sense that the mind is itself filled with such a cloud of haze. B. At the same instant, he is, as it were, bathed in an emotion of joy, assurance, triumph, salvation. The last word is not strictly correct if taken in its ordinary sense, for the feeling, when fully developed, is not that of a particular act of salvation is effected, but that no special salvation is needed, the scheme upon which the world is built being itself sufficient. It is this ecstasy, far beyond any that belongs to the merely self-conscious life, with which the poets, as such, especially occupy themselves, as Gautama in his discourses, preserved in the suttas, Jesus in the parables, Paul in the epistles, Dante at the end of the Purgatorio and the beginning of Paradiso, Shakespeare in the sonnets, Balzac and Seraphita, Whitman in the Leaves, Edward Carpenter in Towards Democracy, leaving to the singers the pleasures and pains, loves and hates, joys and sorrows, peace and war, life and death of self-conscious man, though the poets may treat of these too, but from the new point of view as expressed in the Leaves. I will never again mention love or death inside a house. That is from the old point of view, with the old connotations. C. Simultaneously or instantly following the above sense and emotional experiences, there comes to the person an intellectual illumination quite impossible to describe. Like a flash, there is presented to his consciousness a clear conception, a vision, an outline of the meaning and drift of the universe. He does not come to believe merely, but he sees and knows that the cosmos, which to the self-conscious mind seems made up of dead matter, is in fact far otherwise, is in very truth a living presence. He sees that instead of men being, as it were, patches of life scattered through the infinite sea of non-living substance, they are in reality specks of relative death in an infinite ocean of life. He sees that the life which is in man is eternal, as all life is eternal, that the soul of man is as immortal as God is, that the universe is so built in order that without any peradventure all things work together for the good of each and all, that the foundation principle of the world is what we call love, and that the happiness of every individual is in the long run absolutely certain. The person who passes through this experience will learn in the few minutes or even moments of its continuance more than in months or years of study, and he will learn much that no study ever taught or can teach. Especially does he obtain such a conception of the whole, or at least of the immense whole, as dwarfs all conception, imagination, or speculation springing from and belonging to ordinary self-consciousness, such a conception as makes the old attempts to mentally grasp the universe and its meaning petty and even ridiculous. This awakening of the intellect has been well described by a writer upon Jacob Behmen in these words: the mysteries of which he discoursed were not reported to him, he beheld them. He saw the root of all mysteries, the ungrund or urgrund, whence issues all contrasts and discordant principles, hardness and softness, severity and mildness, sweet and bitter, love and sorrow, heaven and hell. These he saw in their origin. These he attempted to describe in their issue and to reconcile in their eternal results. He saw into the being of God, whence the birth or going forth of the divine manifestation. Nature lay unveiled to him. He was at home in the heart of things. His own book, which he himself was, so Whitman, this is no book. Who touches this touches a man. The microcosm of man, with his threefold life, was patent to his vision. D. Along with moral elevation and intellectual illumination comes what must be called, for want of a better term, a sense of immortality. This is not an intellectual conviction such as comes with the solution of a problem, nor is it an experience such as learning something unknown before. It is far more simple and elementary and could be compared to that certainty of distinct individuality possessed by each one, which comes with and belongs to self-consciousness. E. With illumination, the fear of death, which haunts so many men and women at times all their lives, falls off like an old cloak. Not, however, as a result of reasoning, it simply vanishes. F. The same may be said of the sense of sin. It is not that the person escapes from sin, but he no longer sees that there is any sin in the world from which to escape. G. The instantaneousness of the illumination is one of its most striking features. It can be compared with nothing so well as with a dazzling flash of lightning in a dark night, bringing the landscape which had been hidden into clear view. H. The previous character of the man who enters the new life is an important element in the case. I. So is the age at which illumination occurs. Should we hear of a case of cosmic consciousness occurring at 20, for instance, we should at first doubt the truth of the account, and if forced to believe it, we should expect the man, if he lived, to prove himself in some way a veritable spiritual giant. J. The added charm to the personality of the person who attains to cosmic consciousness is always, it is believed, a feature in the case. K. There seems to the writer to be sufficient evidence that, with cosmic consciousness, while it is actually present and lasting, gradually passing away a short time thereafter, a change takes place in the appearance of the subject of illumination. This change is similar to that caused in a person's appearance by great joy, but at times, that is, in pronounced cases, it seems to be much more marked than that. In these great cases in which illumination is intense, the change in question, rather, is also intense and may amount to a veritable transfiguration. Dante says that he was transhumanized into a god. There seems to be a strong probability that could he have been seen at that moment, he would have exhibited what could only have been called transfiguration. In subsequent chapters of this book, several cases will be given in which the change in question, more or less strongly marked, occurred. Part 10. The passage from self to cosmic consciousness, considered from the point of view of the intellect, seems to be a phenomenon strictly parallel to the passage from simple to self-consciousness. As in the latter, so in the former, there are two chief elements: A. Added consciousness, B. Added faculty. A. When an organism which possesses simple consciousness only attains to self-consciousness, it becomes aware for the first time that it is a separate creature or self-existing in a world which it is apart from. That is, the oncoming of the new faculty instructs it without any new experience or process of learning. B. It, at the same time, acquires enormously increased powers of accumulating knowledge and of initiating action. So when a person who is self-conscious only enters into cosmic consciousness, A. He knows without learning from the mere fact of illumination certain things, as for instance, 1. That the universe is not a dead machine but a living presence. 2. That in its essence and tendency it is infinitely good. 3. That individual existence is continuous beyond what is called death. At the same time, B. He takes on enormously greater capacity for both learning and initiating. Part 11. The parallel holds also from the point of view of the moral nature. For the animal that has simple consciousness merely cannot possibly know anything of the pure delight and simply living that is possessed, at least part of the time, by every healthy, well-constituted young or middle-aged man or woman. Cannot possibly, for this feeling depends on self-consciousness, and without that can have no existence. The horse or dog enjoys life while experiencing an agreeable sensation or when stimulated by an agreeable activity, really the same thing, but cannot realize the everyday calm and the enjoyment of life, independent of the senses and outward things, which belongs to the moral nature. The basic fact, indeed, of the positive side of this starting, as may be truly said, from the central wellspring of the life of the organism, the sense of beyond well-being, that belongs to man and as in truth one of his most valued heritages. This constitutes a plane or plateau in the region of the moral nature upon which the sentient creature steps when passing, or as it passes from simple to self-consciousness. Corresponding with this moral ascent and with those steps above noted, taken by the intellect from simple to self and from self to cosmic consciousness, is the moral ascent that belongs to the passage from self to cosmic consciousness. This can only be realized, therefore, only described by those who have passed through the experience. What do they say about it? Well, read what Gautama and the Illuminati of the Buddhists tell of us of nirvana, namely that is the highest happiness. Says the unknown but unquestionably illumined writer in the Mahabharata, the devotee whose happiness is within himself and whose light of knowledge also is within himself, becoming one with the Brahman, obtains the Brahmic bliss. Note the dicta of Jesus on the value of the kingdom of heaven. To purchase which a man sells all that he has, remember the worth that Paul ascribes to Christ, and how he was caught up into the third heaven. Reflect on Dante's transhumanization from a man into a god, and on the name he gives the cosmic sense, Beatrice, making happy. Here too is his distinct statement of the joy that belongs to it. That which I was seeing seemed to me a smile of the universe, for my inebriation was entering through the hearing and through the sight. O joy, O ineffable gladness, O life entire of love and of peace, O riches secure without longing. See what Behmen says on the same subject. Earthly language is entirely insufficient to describe what there is of joy, happiness, and loveliness contained in the inner wonders of God. Even if the eternal Virgin pictures them to our minds, man's constitution is too cold and dark to be able to express even a spark of it in his language. Observe Elukanamen's oft-repeated exclamation, Sandosium, Sandosium epithem, joy, always joy. And again, Edward Carpenter's All Sorrow Finished, the deep, deep ocean of joy within, being filled with joy, singing joy unending. Above all, bear in mind that the testimony of Walt Whitman, testimony unvarying, though given in every varying language and upon almost every page of the leaves, covering 40 years of life. I am satisfied. I see, dance, laugh, sing. Okay. Wandering, amazed at my own lightness and glee. Oh, the joy of my spirit, it is uncaged, it darts like lightning. I float this carol with joy to thee, O death. And that forecast of the future taken from his own heart, the future when through these states walk 100 millions of superb persons, that is, persons possessed of the cosmic sense rather. And finally, the ocean filled with joy, the atmosphere all joy, joy in freedom, worship, love, joy in the ecstasy of life, enough to merely be, enough to breathe, joy, all over joy. Part 12. Well, someone will say, if these people see and know and feel so much, why don't they come out with it in plain language and give the world to the benefit of it? This is what speech said to Whitman. Walt, you contain enough, why don't you let it out then? But he tells us this. When I undertake to tell the best I find, I cannot. My tongue is ineffectual on its pivots, my breath will not be obedient to its organs, I become a dumb man. So Paul, when he was caught up into paradise, heard unspeakable words. And Dante was not able to recount the things he saw in heaven. My vision, he says, was greater than our speech, which yields to such a sight. And so of the rest. The fact of the matter is not difficult to understand. It is that speech, as fully explained above, is the tally of the self-conscious intellect, can express that and nothing but that, does not tally and cannot express the cosmic sense, or, if at all, only in so far as this may be translated into terms of the self-conscious intellect. Part 13. It will be well to state here, partly in recapitulation, recap, for the benefit of the reader of the next two parts, briefly and explicitly the marks of the cosmic sense. Here they are. A, the subjective light. B, the moral elevation. C, the intellectual illumination. D, the sense of immortality. E, the loss of fear of death. F, the loss of the sense of sin. G, the suddenness, instantaneousness of the awakening. H, the previous character of the man, intellectual, moral, and physical. I, the age of illumination. J, the added charm to the personality so that men and women are always strongly attracted to the person. And K, the transfiguration of the subject of the change as seen by others when the cosmic sense is actually present. Okay, part 14. It must not be supposed that because a man has cosmic consciousness, he is therefore omniscient or infallible. The greatest of these men are in sense in the position, though on a higher plane, of children who have just become self-conscious. These men have just reached a new phase of consciousness, have not yet had time or opportunity to exploit or master this. True, they have reached a higher mental level, but on that level there can and will be comparative wisdom and comparative foolishness, just as there is on the level of simple or self-consciousness. As a man with self-consciousness may sink in morals and intelligence below the higher animal with simple consciousness merely, so we may suppose a man with cosmic consciousness may, in certain circumstances, be little, if at all, above another who spends his life on the plane of self-consciousness. And it must still be more evident that, however godlike the faculty may be, those who first acquire it, living in diverse ages and countries, passing the years of their self-conscious life in different surroundings, brought up to view life and the interests of life from totally different points of view, must necessarily interpret somewhat differently those things which they see in the new world which they enter. The marvel is that they all see the new world for what it is as clearly as they do. The main point is that these men and this new consciousness must not be condemned because neither the men nor the new consciousness are absolute. That could not be. For should man, passing upward from plane to plane, reach an intellectual and moral position as far above that of the best men today as are those above the average mollusk, he would be as far from infallibility and as far from absolute goodness or absolute knowledge as he is at present. He would have the same aspiration to achieve a higher mental position that he has today, and there would be as much room over his head for growth and amelioration as there ever was. Part 15. As summary and introductory anticipation of the cases that are to follow, a tabular statement of those considered as probably genuine is here given. A few words upon this may be of interest. Upon glancing over it, the first thing to strike the reader will be the immense preponderance of men over women among those who have had the new faculty. The second will be the, at first sight, curious fact, to be referred again later, that in nearly all the cases in which the time of year is known, illumination occurred between early spring and late summer. Half of all the cases occurring in or about May and June. The third will be, and this fact is interesting from the point of view of physiology, that there appears to be a general correspondence between the age at illumination and the length of life of the individual. Thus, the average age at illumination of Socrates, Mohammed, Las Casas, and J.B. was 39 years, and the average age at death was 74 and a half years. Though one of them was executed while still hale and strong. In the case of Bacon, Pascal, Blake, and Gardner, the average age at illumination was 31 years, and at death only 54 and a quarter years, being thus on the average 8 years younger at illumination and 9 and a quarter years younger at death, while Gautama, Paul, Dante, Behmen, Yepes, and Whitman all entered cosmic consciousness at the mean age of 34 to 36, had an average life duration of 62 years, one of them, Paul, having been executed at 67. We might expect this correspondence, for as illumination takes place at full maturity, this would, of course, in a general way, correspond with the life limit of the person. So it says here, name, number 1, Moses. Date of birth, 1650, question mark. Age of illumination, unknown. Sex, male. Age of death, old. Okay, let's move to the known ones. Okay, Gautama Buddha. Date of birth, 560. Age of illumination, 35. Sex, male. Age of death, 80. Socrates. Date of birth, 469. Age of illumination, 39. Sex, male. Time of year of illumination, summer. Age of death, 71. Jesus, date of birth, 4 AD, I guess. Age of illumination, 35. Male. Time of year of illumination, January, perhaps. Age of death, 38, perhaps. Paul, date of birth, 0. Age of illumination, 35. Sex, male. Age at death, 67. Plotinus, age of birth, 204. Unknown dates. Date of age of death 66. Mohammed, year of birth, 570. Age of illumination 39. Sex male. Perhaps it was in May, and died at 62. Roger Bacon, age of birth 1214. Unknown of the dates of his awakening, died at 80. Dante, age of birth 1265. Age of illumination 35. Male. Time of year spring. Age of death 56. Las Casas, age of birth 1474. Age of illumination 40. Male. In June was the time of year, and died at 92. Wow. John Upes, age of birth 1542. Age of illumination 36. Male. The time of year early summer. Age of death 49. Francis Bacon, year of birth 1561. Age of illumination 30. Male. Age of death 66. Bayman, age of birth 1575. Age of illumination 35. Male. Age of death 49. Pascal, age of birth 1623. Age of illumination 31 and a half. Male. Time of year November. Age of death 39. Spinoza, time of birth 1632. Unknown dates of illumination, and died at 45. And we got Swedenborg, Gordon Blake, Balzac, age of birth 1799. Age of illumination 32. Male. Age of death 51. And we'll save Whitman for last. Age of birth 1819. Age of illumination 34. Male. Time of year in June, and age of death 73.